It could turn out to be the worst environmental disaster in more than 20 years.
Thousands of gallons of crude oil are oozing into the Louisiana coastal waters 10 days now after that oil rig exploded in the Gulf of Mexico.
And this afternoon, rescue crews cleaned their first bird found coated with oil, which is being spilled at a rate of 5,000 barrels every day. It could take up to 3 months to drill a relief well to plug the leak. And at the current rate of leakage, this spill would eclipse the Exxon Valdez disaster in Alaska back in 1989.
And that's why the federal government is now getting involved. NBC's Jay Gray begins our team coverage.
Oil continues to slowly creep into Louisiana's wetlands.
Total catastrophe, a hurricane hitting us a little bit at a time.
Only this is a man-made disaster. Teams continue to ferry booms to the most vulnerable areas, but environmentalists wonder if it's even worth the trip. Rescue teams have already found animals dipped in the muck.
The containment booms don't work with this weather. The containment at the site has not been effective. And don't forget, this spill is still putting out 200,000 gallons of oil a day. It's a river into the Gulf of Mexico.
A river fueled by 5,000 barrels of oil a day, pouring out of the crippled Deepwater Horizon rig.
This is a new challenge. It's something that we've never had in this magnitude before.
As work continues today, for the first time, Coast Guard officials are putting a timeline on when they might be able to control the flow of oil.
We hope within the next week that they'll be able to put a cap at the leak site so that we can take that oil up to the surface through a hose and have it put onto a barge so that we don't have the release into the water.
But right now it's in the water, and according to forecasters this weekend, oil could coat the Gulf Coast from Louisiana to the Mississippi-Alabama border. A high-profile team arrived from Washington today to oversee the cleanup effort and push forward with the investigation into what caused this mess.
We cannot rest, and we will not rest, until BP permanently seals the wellhead and until they clean up every drop of oil.
And until they have an answer, President Obama has announced a ban on any new offshore drilling. Of course, the primary concern right now is the oil that's already made it to the surface.
That slick floating on top of the Gulf waters is still growing, which is why recovery teams will continue their work around the clock here. Jay Gray, NBC News, Venice, Louisiana.
11 people remain unaccounted for following the April 20th explosion on board that rig. 115 people were evacuated, including 17 who were hurt, 3 critically. 1 injured person remains in the hospital. More than 400 species of wildlife, including whales and dolphins, face a dire threat from this spill. KXAN's Katina McHenry has more on that threat and how a local agency is ready to help out if needed. Katina?
That's right, Robert. Well, the oil has posed significant impacts on Louisiana's seafood economy and their wildlife. And there are literally thousands of birds and nesting habitats that could be affected. But officials at the Texas Land Office are ready to help. The images leave you in awe. Floating oil stretching for miles. Officials say oil is still pouring out literally 5,000 barrels a day, costing BP up to $15 million a day to clean up. BP isn't the only one paying the price.
It is going to have an impact on our coastal ecosystems. That's going to impact our fisheries, going to impact our bird population. It potentially is going to have an impact on our populated areas as well.
Many remember seeing this, birds that swam into oil as a result of the Exxon Valdez spill in 1989.
We've all seen images of birds with oil on their wings and bodies, and there are literally thousands and thousands of birds over there.
Oil has already reached the Louisiana coast, putting thousands of animals in danger. But Texas is ready to help with valuable resources.
We also have some bird rehabilitation trailers. We have 2 bird cleaning trailers and 1 trailer that's designed to house the birds after they've been cleaned. Those, of course, would be available if, in fact, large numbers of birds are impacted.
And many wonder if wildlife is all that should be worried. With the spill still not under control, should Texas beachgoers be concerned?
If it does get to Texas, it will likely be in the form of tar balls, which are easily recovered on the beach and pose really minimal threats to wildlife and beachgoers, etc. It's a nuisance. You get tar on your feet, but it's not going to hurt you.
While several other local government agencies are ready to assist with personnel and equipment right now, all they're doing is keeping an eye on Louisiana. Reporting live in Central Austin, Katina McHenry, KXAN Austin News.
Thanks, Katina. Well, the U.S. gets 25% of its domestic energy from the Gulf of Mexico. Accidents like this one are very rare, but also very devastating. KXAN's David Scott has continuing coverage on the safety of the Gulf Coast oil platforms and how the massive oil slick could endanger Louisiana's fragile wetlands and seafood industry.
We're a long way from the old lone wolf wildcatter days. There are now 3,500 deep-water oil platforms off the shores of America, and their track record is good, cleaner and safer than long-distance tankers or America's coal industry. Still, this spill is a massive one. This is the latest viable satellite picture of the coast. You can see the wind and tide taking the oil spill in toward shore. The white-lined areas indicate endangered wetlands and estuaries.
The concern over the past years has been over the loss of wetlands due to man-made and natural processes. The concern about the spill, at least one of the concerns is, will it accelerate the loss of wetlands?
UT professor Chip Grote served 12 years as Louisiana's chief state geologist and survey director. He says we won't know the long-term damage to the already eroding wetlands until the oil moves in closer.
Louisiana is so dependent on the resources that come out of those wetlands, including oil and gas, but also shrimp and oysters and other things. Will the habitats that these creatures live in be severely degraded by the oil, and will it reduce their productivity significantly?
Navy and Coast Guard units are standing by with containment buoys and skimmers. Air Force C-130s are standing by for the go-ahead to dump chemicals on the spill. Weather may be a problem. The skimmers don't work in seas of 6 or 7 feet. Meanwhile, the blown-out well, 40 miles offshore, continues to spew 5,000 barrels a day into the water. President Obama says there will be no new oil drilling until the cause of the explosion is known, but Professor Grote says now is not the time to overreact, as bad as this disaster is.
I think based on the safety record of offshore and its environmental record, they're overreacting to a great degree. This was fortunately an isolated instance, a very serious one, but it's not representative of the offshore industry in general.
The Interior Department's been given 30 days to look into what happened and report back. In the meantime, the president says the oil company BP bears ultimate responsibility in this, and the price tag will be enormous. At the Bob Bullock Texas State History Museum, I'm David Scott, KXAN Austin News.